In this video, I will show you everything I learned through every hurdle I had to overcome, starting from a concept on a screen up until I had successfully built a functional replica of Daredevil's billy clubs. Good day, I'm Dan and I like to make props. And with the beginning of any journey, it all started with a Google. Searching up my go-to marketplace for 3D print files, called 3D, I loaded up their website and used the search bar to see what they had for me. It didn't take long before I found this billy club design by Mystery Makers. That was made up of lots of small parts that came together to make a functional prop that could split apart into 3 different props. My next thought was, this is too cool not to make. So that's what I did. In Ultimaker Cura, I picked out 2 of the parts I would use to run some quality tests. The first test was to see how well the grip texture would print, and I was surprised at how good it looked. The second test was one of strength, and there was only one way I could think to do that. Safe to say that was also a pass. The third and final test was to see how well the parts would screw together, and if by design they did. Happy with the quality of the test print, and realising that because of the grip pattern, the layer lines weren't that noticeable, meant I could save hours of sanding and painting if I just printed with a red filament. The closest to the right colour I could find was this cherry red matte PLA filament, bought from Amazon. Seeing that this type of filament needed a higher temperature to melt, I bumped up the heat to 215 degrees and printed a bed levelling check. The first to print with this new filament were these 2 parts using these print settings. It was at this point though that I started to think that things are going a little too well for a Pierce Props video, and that's when this happened. My first hurdle.
What the f?
After doing some research and after running some more tests, I realised then how difficult matte PLA was to print with. My solution was to change the raft for a brim for better build plate adhesion. The next was to print the parts one at a time in case they did fail. And for the printer itself, I swapped out the current brass nozzle for a more durable steel one, and then increased the temperature of the nozzle and the bed before attempting to print again with no issues. Because the brim acted as an extension onto the base of the print, to remove it, I lightly sanded away the first layer and the brim then just peeled away, which was very satisfying. To give the matte red a slight shine, like in the reference picture, I used some clear semi-gloss spray paint, which also added a protective layer of sorts. While those dried, I went ahead and started printing the last few parts with a much more simple grey PLA filament, as these pieces would then need to be painted later on. This also meant that I would have to go through the whole sanding and smoothing process, which started with a coating of filler primer spray paint. To then remove the primer and the layer lines with it, I began with a fairly rough grit sandpaper. Afterwards, using a very fine grit sanding sponge to hide the scratch marks. I then gave all the sanded parts a bath to remove dust, before using spray paint that gives a chrome gloss finish. Once dry, all the parts were then finished and ready to be assembled together, using superglue. For the functional part of the prop, how it worked was both ends could untwist and separate, making two clubs out of one staff at one end and a nunchuck at the other. For the nunchuck part, I found this 5mm steel gardening wire that wasn't very easy to cut. It took me having to find some proper bolt cutters to do the job. These two useful rings that came with the print files I used to wrap the end of the wire through. Then I mixed up some 2-part epoxy resin and used it to secure the wire to itself so it couldn't be pulled loose. Once feeding the wire through the mechanism, I locked it off at the other end. After giving the epoxy resin 24 hours to cure, I attached the mechanisms to the ends of the handles. And finished off the billy clubs by screwing these end caps on. However, making the billy clubs alone simply wasn't difficult enough, so I returned to Cults 3D to begin another journey into making a matching holster to go with them. Files by Dallin's Creations. This time I used Mesh Mixer to load up the file to run a different kind of test. I used the plane cut tool to take a thin slice out of the holster and printed it at 100% scale. This test was to see if the billy clubs would actually fit into the holster, and yes they would. Already happy with the default scale of the file, I printed the file vertically. Printing the holster vertically, I soon realised was not ideal. While removing the supports, the thinnest part along the middle snapped in half several times. This happened because of how the layer lines ran horizontally across, making the holster fragile when bent along the grain. To fix the problem, I flipped the holster on its side, which changed the direction of the layer lines and would make the holster stronger. I hoped. Unfortunately, due to printing the holster sideways, I now had these imperfect layers on top and underneath. A solution though was to use a hot soldering iron to melt the layers smooth, which took a while, but looked much better. Still, the strength and the durability of the holster was a worry. So I had this genius idea to mix up a load more epoxy resin that I used to spread along the back of the holster, adding more thickness and strength as it hardened. Lego Pro 191 is subscribed to my Props tier membership on Patreon. There they get exclusive access to updates regarding my current and future prop builds, on and off camera, and have first dibs on all my released prop templates, discounted and for free. Now their name is immortalised on this prop, and yours can be too. Also on my Patreon is my support tier, where you can take part in polls that decide what I create or play next, with extra, more personal content to view and a community of like-minded people to chat to. Not your cup of tea? Consider becoming a free member to receive upload schedule updates and a sneak peek into when the next video is out and what it's about. Thank you for your support. Same as with the billy clubs, I gave the holster a shower with clear semi-gloss paint. The last thing the holster needed now were some straps, and with that spawned another problem. The straps were too big. Starting with one belt, I worked to make it shorter by 10 centimeters. Off camera, I hand stitched around the edge for extra strength, and then copied the same process for the second belt. The holster was finished and now the whole prop was complete. Enjoy the showcase. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, then you must be enjoying this content. So give us a like, subscribe, and comment the word nunchuck to let me know you made it to the end. See you next time.